I'm just going to share a few of the preliminary interim results with you right now. And I'm not gonna talk too much about them because they aren't the final results. And like I said, some of this information will change, but the question here was, are you aware of the work and community engagement done by the Corktown Residents and Business Association? So pretty good engagement. Our board thinks there's a lot of work to do to integrate our organization more into the condo community that has really sprung up in the last 5 or 6 years. So if you are in a condo and have access to a Facebook group and you can share our events and stuff like that, that's one really good way to get more engagement for the CRBA, because we are planning to engage in a few new ways over the next year. And move on to the next question, which was whether or not people support a business improvement area, a BIA, in the neighborhood. So over, or almost 90% were in high favor of BIA in Corktown. And this is something that a number of businesses have been asking us about, a number of residents. We've even had a few landlords reach out and wonder why there isn't one here. So this looks like a project that we'll have to hand over to the business community, but certainly from these initial results, quite positive. The the next one here, are you a business owner, resident, or both? One of the interesting parts of this result is that 10% of the respondents out of the sample size own and operate a home-based business in the neighborhood. So that's only about 6% brick and mortar business owners that responded. And we had a number of responses from people in neighboring areas. This was a cool one to actually look at. What attracted you to live or launch your business in Corktown? And I'm just gonna increase the size of the text here so you can all read this a little easier. But I thought this one was kind of cool. Transit was a big one. And history and heritage was a surprising result for me. I thought we were gonna get like a good number, but not almost 50%. So that was really cool to see. And we've got a couple of our board members that are doing really good work in that area. And the parks, good response there. So I think that this is probably going to change a bit when we get to the full results, but nice to see this, this being responded to quite well. This is a project that one of our board members is working on right now. We can't give away too much information on it, but they're looking at a music and culture center in Corktown. And these are the types of components that are being considered for that structure. So we have a lot of creative people in the neighborhood, lots of musicians, lots of artists, lots of theater performers, actors. So it's not surprising to see a lot of the results here, especially for practice spaces and performance venues. Restaurant and cafe, I guess we want more takeout and dine-in options in the neighborhood. So this will be interesting to see the full results. And this was another one of the questions. We weren't too sure how this was going to go. So the King Street Transit Priority Transit Corridor ends at Jarvis Street. And we've had a number of residents and a number of businesses ask us and also approach councillor's office wondering, like, why isn't it extended further, like to River Street? So we figured, let's ask the question. Would you like to see this extended east to River Street? What that would mean is, like, you'd see potential permanent curb lane closures for restaurant patios. You'd see more frequent transit service, probably more traffic calming measures. So it's just a question at this point. We'll probably bring this forward to the councillor and to the City of Toronto and see if it's something that is worth pursuing, but quite a favorable response here. And then this is the last question that I'll bring up today. When you think of Corktown, what do you perceive as its identity? And lots of good positive responses here. Corktown Common, Underpass Park. And what was interesting to see is about 25%. I don't think it has a clear identity. That's one of the biggest questions that we've been asking our board, and a number of our volunteers have started looking at this question of how do we build a stronger identity for the area? So that's, I think, a big abstract question that we're going to have to continue asking and hopefully finding some answers for. But those are the preliminary results. We're still, the survey is still open, so feel free to send it to your friends. And we're hoping to get up to 300 responses by the time we close it next week. And once that's done, we'll tabulate the results and crunch the data a little more, and then send out the final results sometime later in August. So with that, I would like to hand this over to Adam Vaughan. And thanks for joining us today, Adam. I'll leave it with you.
Well, thanks very much for the invitation. It's a great turnout on a sort of a weird stormy midweek night in the middle of August, but it just speaks to the strength of the neighborhood associations in the southeast end of the city, and good to see everyone on today. I guess what I can do is take a lot of questions tonight. That's probably the most useful role I can play. We haven't had a lot of rollouts of new programs lately, although we have signaled a couple of important ones. One is the transition of CERB, the Canadian Emergency Relief Benefit, to more of an EI-based program. And that's been done primarily for a couple of reasons. One, EI has a very strong working well on benefit program. And I think as we move from isolation and social distancing into stages of recovery, blending how people get back to work is going to be critically important, and also addressing the high number of people who work within the gig economy, making sure that we have a program that meets their needs as their income comes back online, but doesn't come back online in a very predictable way. And so we have to be smart about that, particularly in the riding I represent, but it's not too different to the East End. So the benefits continue, and those benefits are there to support people who have to make some difficult choices as they relate to COVID. But I think the real news from the last couple of weeks is the $19 billion provincial federal fund that's being created, which is in Ontario's case is worth about $7 billion to the province, of which about $4 billion is going straight to the city. And it includes funding for people in vulnerable settings. So that includes trying to tackle some of the challenges associated with homelessness and COVID. It includes operating dollars for transit, and includes as well the largest single in-year investment into childcare in the country's history. It's well over $630 million, about $632 million going to the provinces. That's a first stage investment into childcare, and what we actually refer to it more as family care, because it's also for those people who care for a senior, as we do in our family, who lives with you at home with issues related to aging. We need to make sure that people have their families in a safe space so that they can return to work if they choose, or if they choose to care for their families, have the support they need to care for those family members. That, of course, is most focused around childcare because of the impact on women through COVID on unemployment. But women care for more than just little children. Sometimes they care for their parents as well. It's unfortunate that work falls so often to women, but nonetheless, we're taking steps to invest heavily into family care so that people get the support they need to make the good choices they need to make to support their families. In terms of the business supports, the wage has been extended. That includes support to the nonprofit sector. We're through our first $350 million of funding for frontline charitable and nonprofit sector organizations, which prioritize racialized communities. And we are at the stage now, right now, in terms of our federal planning, of taking a look at what the recovery needs to look like, what a budget for that recovery needs to look like, and which departments need to step up on which fronts. And in terms of the Toronto caucus work, we've been meeting all summer long with Toronto City councillors and city leaders to fully understand their needs and to make sure our federal dollars land in Toronto properly. But you'll be seeing the 416 caucus in conjunction with City Hall enunciate what the needs are to put Toronto back in a strong recovery position and to sustain that recovery, and to also provide the supports that are required to make sure that women in particular have a full slate of choices available to them by making sure that family care is prioritized within that setting. That being said, I think it's probably easier now for me to answer questions than to continue talking. But if you have any questions, happy to answer them. And for those that I don't have answers to, I'll make a point of emailing responses back to the Corktown Residents Association, and you can redistribute those answers to make sure that you get the full information you need. And with that, I'll send it back to you, Aaron.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, so if you do have a question, what I'll have you do is just go to the bottom of Zoom, and you can tap reactions there and raise your hand. And actually, we do have a question in chat, Adam. Can you please clarify the boundaries of your constituency?
I'll try. It's redistribution really played a game with mine. So basically, the riding I represent, if you think of it, it takes in the harborfront area from effectively the C&E grounds all the way across to the Humber River. Inside where it sort of touches Corktown, it moves up Cherry Street and cuts in on Mill Street and moves up to the Esplanade, and from the Esplanade it gets to Bay Street, and from Bay Street it moves to Front, and from Front it moves it continues. Sorry, it moves to Yonge, and from Yonge across Front to Bay Street, then up Bay Street to Dundas, along Dundas to about Dovercourt, down Dovercourt in through Sudbury, and sort of wraps around Liberty Village, and then back down to the C&E. It's kind of like a crumpled top hat, with the waterfront being the base. It's zigzagged on both sides, but Dundas and the waterfront with some very tricky side streets in between.
Thank you. Well, yeah, so if you have a question, you can raise your hand or you can toss it into the chat window. I do have a question for you, Adam, that a number of our residents have been asking about affordable housing specifically. I know that's a file that you've been working on for a couple of years, especially in urban areas across Canada. So can you give everyone a brief update on that work that you're doing?
So I'm the Parliamentary Secretary of the Minister who's in charge of the housing file, and for the last 6 years have been working on building the National Housing Strategy, legislating the right to housing, reprofiling our federal homeless dollars, and also working very closely with Indigenous communities and urban settings across Canada to establish a fourth corridor of housing funding for Indigenous organizations. My job primarily in Ottawa since first getting elected and leaving City Council has been focused on that National Housing Strategy. It's a $55 billion program. We're in year sort of 3 of it. And I made 6 announcements on new housing programs in and around Lake Ontario last week, from St. Catharines right around to Kingston. We are continuing to build new housing through COVID. In fact, that's what the announcements were all about. Many of them have been delayed over the isolation period. And it's roughly aimed at doing 3 key things. About 25% of the money is on new construction. About 25% of the money is on the restoration or maintenance of existing public housing. And then about 50% of it is the subsidies required to take housing that's largely built in the marketplace and subsidizing it into affordability with rent geared to income programs. And so the new Canada-Ontario Housing Benefit, for example, which has been funded and is ready to launch but hasn't been tapped into yet, is one of those programs to help, in particular at a time like COVID, to help people make their rent and protect people's housing, because it's much easier to keep people in housing than to rehouse them after they've lost. The program, as it relates to COVID, has been modified. We doubled the money for homelessness immediately. In fact, we did that before the lockdown was even announced, because we could see a vulnerable population that without proper supports could really be a source of community concern. And in doing so, we have also changed a lot of the rules and regulations around what's called Reaching Home. And the way Reaching Home works is it works with a 60. We started with 61 communities. We added 6 during COVID. So there's 67 designated communities. There's a rural stream and an indigenous stream, and the funding is managed by a collective of local on-the-ground frontline agencies that disperse the dollars across a systems plan, which includes, in this case, the City of Toronto, as many Ontario communities deliver that service. And it's about $157 million a year in top-up that we provided to what is normally about a $200 million a year program. And we are about to disperse another chunk of that to areas that still have stubborn patterns of COVID transmission, Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal being the 3 biggest centers of concern, with Ottawa very close fourth. And then what we do is that we are moving towards a second surge of dollars to help with the homeless community. And then we have a program which has not yet been announced on. We've worked on 4,000 people living in shelters who are on the street, being housed temporarily during COVID. And we have a new fund program that's going to look to make the housing that's being acquired for those individuals made more permanent, so we don't push people back onto the street as we emerge from COVID. So those dollars are being announced to be said. There's been a special bunch of reasons for housing. We're to continue to provide a new chapter to the we've seen housing a critical so help people stay home and at homes and safe and affordable. This enough for the second wave is from there is support and we have to recognize I may have lost your audio for a second.
Yeah.
Oh, there I am back. Okay, sorry.
No worries. I couldn't tell if it was me or you. It's my internet connection. I'm out in Essex County right now is tenuous.
Not a problem.
Yeah. Can you maybe just repeat the last like 30 seconds of?
Sure. It's just that our government is very much focused right now on making sure that when we build back better, that in fact we move to eliminate and end homelessness in this country. That we stop paying for the management of services, and then get the numbers no one in the sector is functional zero, and that's the goal. Is it dipping out again?
Yeah, you're cutting in and out a little bit. Yeah, let's if it keeps happening, I'm going to have you rejoin, but there are a couple of questions in the chat window here that are kind of multi-jurisdictional. So when Adam gets back, we'll figure this out. Yeah, if you do have any questions, everyone that's joined, feel free to put them in the chat, or you can raise your hand if you'd like to ask it. All right. Adam, can you unmute yourself?
Yep.
Thank you. Great, welcome back.
No worries.
So yeah, a couple of questions that are kind of multi-jurisdictional. The first one from Tricia, what is the status of the Ontario line given the pandemic? Hopefully you can give a little insight there.
Sure, I had a conversation with the NDP's transit critic today from Queen's Park, and our caucus, of course, is in touch on infrastructure issues on a regular basis. The Ontario line, as it's configured, and part of it would run through my riding, part of it obviously runs through your neck of the city. The provincial government says they need our commitment before they can proceed. We need a business plan, which means a real map. with the real geography identified, where the real station locations are properly identified and the costing is actually done. Right now, it is while I understand how they use surface track through the East End, I don't understand how they get north of in the city, and I don't understand, quite frankly, how they move west from Queen and Yonge. The pattern as it runs through my riding is along Queen Street, and then it appears on one map to take a diagonal cut through a neighborhood of condominiums, which I don't know how you drive a train through those parking garages, but good luck. And if it doesn't do that, if it's a hard left turn at Queen and Yonge, then it goes along Queen Street to Bathurst, down Bathurst to Fort York, and then I don't know how you gets under and over and around the rail corridor, Fort York, and the Gardiner Expressway, and then somehow lands at Ontario Place, and then makes it to some mythical point on the exhibition grounds. If it's to move along Queen Street and go south on Bathurst, it will close down the 4 busiest streetcar lines in the city for the period of 10 years. Let that sink in for a bit. That's the proposition, because the Queen streetcar, the King streetcar, the Bathurst streetcar, and the Spadina streetcar would all have to be tunneled under while construction is underway, and we know that just won't happen. So we're waiting for the for the provincial government to provide us with a business plan. We know that they've spent all of their transit dollars, every penny of their transit dollars, the entire province, just on the one-stop Scarborough subway. And if they add 2 or 3 stops, it only gets more expensive. All of this means that it's a lot of sound and fury. They're certainly holding meetings. They're certainly doing soul testing along the route. But I just don't think they have a route yet. I don't think they have a costing or a business plan. I think it's going to collapse under its own weight and probably won't outlive the Ford government. And in 10 years' time, we'll be talking about a relief line all over again. The real goal, I think, of the transit plan is to get Toronto to consent to the Yonge line going north before the relief line is built. And I think that's really the only political objective here. And as I said, until they have a fully costed plan, the federal government is not prepared to sign off on it.
Yeah, thanks for the detailed answer, Adam. I even wasn't aware of the 4 main streetcar lines being shut down for the construction of this. That's unreal. That's wild.
Well, as was said at the time, someone needs to tell Doug Ford that magic markers aren't magic. And you can draw lines on a map, but it's a very different thing to build a subway underneath the crowded downtown core.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think as most of us have lived in Toronto a while, we just want something done. But maybe the right thing would be a little nicer.
Be careful what you ask for.
Yeah. So I've got another question here from James, who works on our Corktown News, and he actually lives on Queen Street, just east of Parliament, and it's a bit of a dead zone. It's a lot of boarded up business spaces. So his question is, how can we maximize business space on Queen East to take in taxes and liven up the street? What would be a good strategy there, would you recommend?
Well, the main streets have got to come back, and part of the challenge with the circumstance that the city finds itself in with lost operating revenue that just can't be suddenly turned back on and the city made whole, is that if the city had to do a 30 or 40% tax increase and do it this year, the downtown businesses, what COVID didn't destroy, the tax hike would. And it's one of the reasons why we as a Toronto caucus have been advocating so hard and got the city's funding into the provincial bailout package. So the challenge now is, how do we revive our main streets? We have to be very careful at the taxes and fees we apply to them because they are extraordinarily high in the downtown core, especially along the older main streets. So streets like Queen Street, even in my riding, have had a lot of stores disappear over COVID, and their path back to reopening is not an easy one. Some probably won't reopen, and as a result of that, a couple of things. One, the pressure on residential taxes is going to go up, and the strategy to repopulate those stores has got to be really worked on very quickly. When I was a city councillor, we had a couple of stretches of Dundas that were very similar to the Queen and Parliament stretch that you talk about. And one of the things we worked very closely with was OCAD University, and we got landlords to effectively give free cultural space to young and emerging artists who created events that drew people from all across the city into neighborhoods and kind of repopulated the streetscape. And in doing so, the cafes, the corner stores, the shop that might have been closed at 9 o'clock at night, but was interesting to somebody who, it became the calling card. So this is the way that Dundas West effectively revived itself. We also revisited some of the street clearing practices around rush hour and gave a bit of comfort for people to stop their cars, get out and do a bit of shopping. But I think that your local BIAs are going to be critically important in terms of supporting their initiatives to populate their streets and to reanimate the empty storefronts and to create a smile without any missing teeth effectively. So culture is a great driver in that. I think utilizing the storefront for neighboring restaurants is a way of spreading people out and increasing seating capacity. I think that the look of Queen Street, certainly as it runs through my riding, West Queen West, the use of the parking lane for a lot more patio space has really drawn people onto the street again. And as we animate the streets and do it safely, and as we shield them from any sudden gigantic tax increases, I think we're in a good space to keep things moving along. But I would argue that the high streets of Toronto were in trouble before COVID, and as in many situations, COVID creates where there was a weakness before. COVID has created a catastrophe. I think our high streets were in trouble. We were losing green grocers. We were losing hardware stores, the sort of things that you could walk to on a Saturday afternoon to get your family's needs met instead of having to get into a car. I think it's time for City Council to really rethink what high streets are for. And I saw the former chief of staff to the mayor saying that this idea of creating walkable communities is some sort of nostalgic vision. I think it's actually good environmental policy. I think it's good local economic policy. I think we need to build resiliency in supply chains into our neighborhoods. I think we need to reimagine how we manage storefront commercial space. And quite frankly, if you go to London, Ontario, for example, their entire public housing program for the last 4 years has been to acquire these distressed properties on Main Street, use their economic development department to start new little businesses and nurture them and grow them, but they then take over the second and third floors and they turn them into supportive housing and affordable housing. And so as we move through this period of distressed real estate assets, if we're smart about our investments from the different orders of government, and if we focus on reviving main streets, we may be able to build back our neighborhoods better than the direction they were currently headed in at the time of COVID. But it's going to take everybody worrying about the health of their main street and about shopping and utilizing their main streets and bringing it back to health, because quite frankly, the neighborhoods depend on them. And maybe out of this process, we get some more social enterprise on the street front, and in doing so, create neighborhoods that have the services they need, that don't require as many people getting in cars on Saturday afternoon, which, as we know, is no fun to do downtown.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for the answer. I'm gonna actually throw it over to James because there was a second part of that question that I missed. So just 1 second. James, you should be able to unmute yourself and ask the other part of your question.
Yeah, am I on now?
Yep, you're on.
Okay. So my question is this, and it might be very unpopular with Councillor Vaughan there. But what I'm wondering about is almost what you said about taking over some of the old businesses on Queen Street East. In this case, however, we've got a lot of Toronto or Ontario housing on Queen Street East, which if they were storefronts, it would enliven the street. Then if you want to put people above that, that would be great. But as it is now, there's so much Toronto housing or housing in this area that it's hard to get this area going, never mind the businesses that can't get going. So that was my question.
Being on the north and south side of a street or east and west side, it requires having both sides of the street engaged with commercial activity, and the tower in the park concept that pushes the towers back off of Queen Street on the north side certainly is a real problem. It's nice that there's one container there. I'd ask you to take a look at what we did at Dundas and Bathurst, where we wrapped a community center with shipping containers, and we created low-income points of we started about 20 little businesses along what's called Market 707, and that was that began as a way of training people up to redesign and reformat Alexander Park, which is the public housing neighborhood south of Kensington Market, which is going to have 25,000 square feet of storefront space on Dundas when we're finished, and actually a park that connects it down to Queen Street. So I would argue that part of what we have to do is and I was when I was a city councilor, was a strong advocate of this, the idea of nonprofit commercial space to nurture little businesses. It takes 5 or 6 little businesses for one to take hold and be truly successful. If you start lots of little businesses and create space for lots of little businesses to start, what you end up with is a complete shopping network. And as I said, one of the best ways to do that is to also attract cultural capacity, because they're free marketing for you effectively. The networks of artists that pull people in to see a new show or new play or what have you, is one of the best ways we've found to revitalize dormant commercial strips. But I agree, there's some missing fabric along Queen Street. Repurposing that and turning it into low-income commercial opportunities where families upstairs can start a business downstairs and run a little business collectively. Those are the sorts of things that need to be done as quick, discrete interventions, and they've worked really well on Dundas Street in our part of the city. There's no reason why they couldn't continue to work really well along Moss Park and along the other parts of Queen Street as you move from Jarvis right through to past Moss Park to out towards Corktown. It's animation, and it's imagination, and it's letting people do what they do naturally, which is market their wares. We had several little businesses which have done shockingly well. I mean, to the point of employing people in the community, and they were started with a wing and a prayer and a hot plate, and they've evolved from there to the point where we've had one graduate all the way to being a storefront restaurant.
Yeah, that's a good point. I remember my grandparents moved to Canada in the 50s, and they lived above their store for the first 20 years. And had they not had that opportunity, it would have been a lot more difficult. So getting people living in and operating their businesses in the same space, it's something we've lost a lot of, I think, and would be a great way to integrate better community fabric. So that's a great idea. Another question here, cycling question. I think it's more of a city-related question, but someone has been finding that a lot of cyclists are riding on the sidewalks instead of the bike lanes. What can be done about that?
You know, it's well, first of all, if you give cyclists better choices, they make better choices. But I think with the pandemic, a lot of people have decided that the TTC is dangerous and they're cycling for the first time. And unfortunately, they just don't feel safe on some of the major streets. And so they take to the sidewalk thinking it's just them, and they don't realize the risk they pose. And they do pose significant risk to lots of different pedestrians. You know, it's a conversation that needs to be had. And the city through COVID has gotten very aggressive and has added a lot of bike lanes, which is fantastic. But unless people feel safe, they ride where they feel safe. And unfortunately, in Toronto streets, far too often, the sidewalk feels safer to the cyclists, and that's why the law is broken. I think that a good conversation usually gets them thinking differently, but at the same time, the city's got a lot of new cyclists now, and so it's a public education campaign, and it's the addition of new bike lanes. The better the bike lanes, the fewer that ride on the sidewalks, but it only takes one idiot to create a danger.
So maybe we should see the federal government pushing for more CAN bike participation.
Well, we made for the first time ever cycling eligible under the infrastructure programs, and in fact, the whole West End rail corridor that comes down from the junction all the way down now to the downtown core, that was all paid for with federal infrastructure dollars. We've also expanded the bike share program through federal investment. So we are paying for cycling infrastructure, but it's up to the city and the provinces to make the decisions. But we've certainly made it eligible.
Well, I think that's a big question with a lot of hot opinions. So certainly more of a city-related question, and I think probably enforcement is another answer there. But let's move on. We've got time for a couple more questions, and then we're going to move on to Digital Main Street. One of the questions is about CERB. You touched on this a bit earlier. It's from one of our board members, Corey Lemos. I've heard that come September, the CERB is likely to be extended in some manner. When do you think we'll hear an update on this? So I know you mentioned already that it's kind of being rolled into EI, but can you give a little more detail on that?
Yeah, we're waiting for some design components to it, and trying to figure out three particular groups. One is people who are in the gig economy who don't pay EI premiums, how we enroll them into the CERB program so that as their industry comes back online in spurts and starts and stops, they have a way of accessing it, and that's a long overdue reform. The second thing is that we have got to figure out for families with expecting children who haven't had the ability to log hours under EI's maternity and paternity benefits. We need to figure out how they will be enrolled, and then we need to make sure that when we boost support for people, in particular folks on disability pensions, that the provincial governments don't claw them back, and they don't take away drug programs or rent supplements because they're suddenly earning dollars. And that's been happening quite a bit right across the country, and we've had to make sure that our work around that protects those vulnerable groups. The big challenge we're having with EI is that we are right at the limit of what the current rate structure supports in terms of employer-employee contributions. We have known for a couple of years that the next big move would require us to rethink the rates and rethink how EI is financed. But I think that the conversations around basic income have led us to a point as a country where we know we need to do that now. But that's going to require some really tough negotiations with provinces, with federal systems, and just figure out how to strengthen it and really adapt it for a 21st century work environment and 21st century labor environment, one where pandemics may become more and more frequent. So we've got to think through what basic income looks like, and we've got to do it in such a way that we rethink the social safety net and build it much stronger. One of the challenges we're having with basic income conversations is that there's a dozen different varieties out there, from universal basic income to basic income to negative income tax models. There's everyone has a system they like. And everyone supports the concept of basic income, but everyone's concept of basic income is different. And so we need to get on the same page, and then we need to get the provinces on the same page with us, and then we need to figure out how it models into existing social supports, and which ones we pull away and which ones we use the revenues to strengthen the system. And I think the time has come for that. It would have been great if the Ontario Basic Income Program had been given us some more answers. It could have told us there were several different ideas being tested there. But we'll have to wait and see, and hope that the provinces are interested in a much more in-depth conversation. But I think the time has come for a basic income conversation. It'll come from federal leadership around EI. And as we start to tackle some of the new employment patterns we're dealing with, it may give us a roadmap forward. But I'd be surprised if we do it quickly, just because there isn't any consensus yet.
Well, thanks for the answer there. That I've actually been advocating on basic income for a few years now, especially after the provincial government cut that very well received program. So it's great to hear the federal government is taking, I guess, picking up those pieces and running with them. So that's it. Thanks, Adam, for joining us today. And we hope to have you again in the future.
Happy to help out. Have a great night.
Bye. Next up, we've got Darryl from Digital Main Street. So for all of our business owners on the line, this is going to be a great presentation. He's going to tell you about some of the programs that Digital Main Street is working on. Like I said earlier, my business took advantage of one of them. We got $2,500 for it. And very happy to have him with us today. So Darryl, come on down.
What's going on, sir? Can you hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Awesome. Thanks, Aaron, for having me. Thanks, guys, for allowing me to kind of jump in and steal some time from you this lovely evening. I don't have a formal presentation. I have some stuff I can send as a follow-up, but I really wanted to chat about two programs that we have available right now. Both come at absolutely no cost to business owners. But both are very different programs. So the first is, as Aaron mentioned, we relaunched a grant program that we previously had. So we have a grant program running right now for commercial businesses in Ontario. So anyone that has, a physical location business, a store, an office, a clinic, whatever it may be. And I'll put the link in the chat, but it's a $2,500 grant to implement some form of digital transformation within your business. So rebuilding your website, investing in some social media, maybe it's a new point of sale system that you've been looking at for a bit now that, you can put some of this money towards. It's pretty robust in terms of what you can spend it on. And it's a very, very simple process. So the process is basically, you sign up on our site, you take a short course that we've created. It's 2.5 hours, but you can take it in I think the longest video is 20 minutes. So you can take it in kind of installments if you want to. And then from there, you're able to submit an application and tell us how you're going to spend the money. And then, and Aaron, I just tossed a link in the chat too. Hopefully it shows up. But it's pretty easy. It's pretty free and clear. Really, the major eligibility criteria, there's some other ones, is having that physical location. So for any of our home-based businesses or anyone that knows any home-based businesses, I got something coming for you next. It's just with this first one, we don't control the criteria, unfortunately. So it is only for those that have a physical location, and it doesn't have to be in a BIA. So a lot of people assume that because it's the Ontario BIA Association that administers the grant that you have to be in a BIA. You do not. It really comes down to kind of that commercial designation. So as long as the building or your office or your store or whatever it is in a commercial area, then you should be eligible. And I say should just because I don't control the funding, so I don't want to put my foot in my mouth. But if anyone has any issues with the grant, please let me know, and my team's happy to kind of jump in and fight the good fight. But really outside of that kind of core thing, we're looking at less than 10 employees full time, or 25 if you're a restaurant or a food service business. You have to be a registered business, obviously. And then just some really easy criteria. You're not a national franchise. We're not here to give $2,500 grants to Starbucks and stuff like that, as much as we love you guys. But really looking at those independent business owners. So I guess my message on that would be, if you're a business and you're interested, I'll even put my direct email in the chat. Please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to chat further. Or if you know a business that could benefit from a potential grant opportunity, please feel free to forward them the link in my contact. And again, just in terms of expenditures, really it comes down to, we put it in 5 big buckets. So we put it in digital marketing. So that means you can do it yourself and run your own advertisements, or you can hire a consultant or an agency to actually help execute those. Your website, so whether it's redesigning it, improving it, or building a brand new one. Software. So looking at, if you're going to do your own in-house graphic design, for instance, or, any kind of productivity software, social media scheduling tools, security software, just anything in that, world. You can invest in training. So if, you're keen to kind of do a lot of this yourself, you can actually receive the grant to take additional training. And you can purchase hardware, but it has to be deemed necessary. So you just have to make a strong business case for why you need a piece of hardware. Unfortunately, in the past, we've had a few people try and slip in and just say, hey, I need a new MacBook Pro for my business. And that's it. It's kind of like, okay, well, what are you going to use it for? What are you going to do? So as long as you can make a case, hardware is acceptable. Question, can social enterprise businesses apply for this awesome opportunity? My understanding as of right now is that if you're a nonprofit organization that meets all the other criteria, you can. But if you're a registered charity, you cannot. So that's something that was made pretty clear by our federal funding partners. But yeah, so I sent you the link to that first program, and I'm here to answer some questions about it. The second program that I wanted to tell you guys about is a program that we launched back in May, but is still going strong. It's called Shop Here. And so what we're doing with that program is we're providing any businesses in the city that want them, essentially, a free online store. So we have a small army of students and team members and recent grads and everything like that, if you're looking for an online store for your business, or again, if you know somebody who could be looking for an online store, a lot of this is applicable to most people. Please let them know. And, we'll pair you up with a student, and they'll kind of walk you through the process of building this store right from the start. And they'll actually teach you how to use the store before they hand it back off to you. So you'll have a fully functioning Shopify store. It costs absolutely nothing to have my team build it for you. You get 90 days free with Shopify. And then after that 3-month trial, you can decide if it's something that you want to keep as part of your business. And if you do, then you have to pay the Shopify monthly fee, which as of right now, I believe is about $40 Canadian a month. And if you decide that it's not a fit for your business or it's not as impactful as you thought, there's zero obligation to stay on after the 90 days. So it's a can't lose situation. Test it out, let us build a store for you. And then if it's not something that, you think makes sense for your business, you don't have to go forward with it after 90 days. And then the other cool thing is too, we've been able to bring a bunch of partners to the table in that program. So as you go through the program, we actually have a ton of really cool credits and opportunities that come with it. So specifically with our Shop Here program, we've partnered with Facebook. So they're giving businesses $100 in advertising credit. Google's giving a free advertising credit, Snapchat. So all the major social media platforms that you would want to advertise on. MasterCard is actually giving away their cybersecurity software for free until the end of the year. So you don't have to worry about your data or your customers' data or anything like that. We have a partner in Toronto called TrueFan who's providing free access to their tool. It's a social analytics tool. So you can understand who your audience is and how to engage with them. The email popped up as I started talking to you guys. We finalized a partnership with a company out of Toronto called Humi. So they're an HR platform. So for businesses that are really looking to either reopen or get started or whatever, they're providing their basic HR platform for free for 6 months to anyone that goes through the Shop Here program. And we have a shipping partner too, who's providing a free credit. So what we tried to do with the program was take away any potential barriers to you being able to operationalize the store. So, we wanted to provide some credit so you can actually advertise to your audience that you have a new business. We wanted to provide you with a credit so that you could actually ship your first package and really just make it as seamless as possible. The other thing I want to stress there is it's open to any type of business. A lot of people think of e-commerce as just, the fact that, I'm selling shirts or hats or something like that. The way I want you guys to think about it is if you're looking to sell anything online, if you're looking to sell services, if you're looking to sell, classes, if you're looking to sell product, there's all integrations and stuff that can make that work. So it's applicable to any type of business. It really just comes down to if you're trying to sell online and get in front of more customers. We're here to kind of help do that at no cost. And that was kind of just my quick ramble on the two programs, but I wanted to just see who has hold on. How long and where has Digital Main Street been operating? Has the outcomes been positive? That's a great question, Nancy, especially because I have a great answer for you. So we've been around for about 5 years now. So we're owned and operated by the Toronto Association of BIAs. So I'm going to get a little ahead of myself here, but when Corktown is a BIA, you guys will work very closely with the team at Tavia. So we've been around for about 5 years, and in 5 years, we've been able to help just under 30,000 businesses. So we're right across Ontario now in about 400 municipalities. We're getting ready to expand right across Canada, and we actually have a US team as well that's running the program down in New York for us. So overall, yes, it's been a very positive 4 to 5 year sprint, I'll call it. And then actually, I lied. I do have one more program I want to talk to you guys about. For anyone, and this goes back to the commercial business piece, for anyone that's got their own business, regardless of where it is in the city, I don't care if it's industrial, manufacturing, commercial, whatever. If you have a physical location business, you also have access to our digital service squad. So I have a team of 15 recent graduates right now that are all marketing and tech experts, and you have free unfettered access to them. So if you want to book an appointment for a free consultation, by all means, book a meeting with them, and I'll put the link in there. But they're great, and all they do is just provide one-on-one support to businesses. So you can book at no cost an appointment with one of our team members. You can go over your website with them. I see a question from Donna here around targeted advertising on social media. You can absolutely go over that with them. They're really just there to help you with whatever you want. They're not trying to sell you anything. We have no mandate. Our only mandate is to show up and say, okay, what can we help you with? And it's, like I said, it's completely free. It's completely accessible. And, you can book multiple appointments a week. You can see them every week if you want. It's essentially an ongoing resource is the best way to think about it. And we actually have a link that I just put in the chat that you can book directly from. So you don't have to worry about, trying to coordinate calendars or find a time that works. You just tell us at that link, do you want to meet with us for 30 or 60 minutes? And then what day and time do you want to meet us? And it will automatically book an appointment for you with one of our specialists. And again, free service, no cost whatsoever. It's just completely. Make it clear, Digital Main Street has no conflict of interest in selling anything. No, we don't sell anything. We sell nothing. In the 5 years, Nancy, that we've been working, we have never charged a business $1 for anything. We always find a way to make sure that we can offer our programming at no cost to businesses. Now, just to be clear though, we do have sponsors and they're on our website, like they're not hiding. So we do have 6 major sponsors and we do promote their product, but we're not selling it. We'll never come into your store. So here's a great example. So Shopify is one of our founding partners. You know, Canada's tech darling company, the most valuable company in Canada. Everyone's seen them in the news lately. And I'm sure we're all thinking the same thing, that we wish we bought their stock 5 years ago. But if you know, I'm just going to pick on the first person I see. If you know, Trisha calls and says, hey guys, you know, I need help with my website, but it's on Lightspeed, that doesn't matter. We're still going to help. So there's no conflict there. Like it's, you know, the promotion in our newsletter will be a Shopify product. But if you're operating Lightspeed or WooCommerce, or you have your website on a different platform, we're still here to help you. And that goes for everyone. Like we would never turn down helping a business because they're not using the right platform, because there is no right platform. The right platform for everyone is very different, right? But yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just want to reiterate that a lot of your funding does come from different sources, governments. So yeah, like I said, my business has used Digital Main Street. They've been great, haven't pushed us toward buying any services whatsoever. But the options are there if you find some other partners valuable. So if there are any final questions for Darryl, ask them now. And I just got to say thanks for joining us today, Darryl. It was good to hear about the 3 programs. And my personal favorite is the grant program because it's free money. Taking a 2.5-hour course, you can't beat that. And like, as long as the business case makes sense, it's a great program. And you know, a lot of people look at $2,500 and they'll say that's not a lot of money, but for a small business right now, that is huge to help them get online. So definitely recommend you take a look at the links that Darryl has put down here. It doesn't look like we have any further questions. So thanks for joining us today, Darryl.
What are all your programs, Mark?
What's your business? Oh, that's for me. My business is called Go Tours Canada. We're a tour company in the Distillery District and Ontario. So
cool. And then Aaron, I guess you have my contact. If anyone wants to chat one-on-one, Aaron, feel free to share my info. I toss my email in there. Happy to chat with whoever, whenever.
Yeah,
we've got a great team, and all we want to do is help. So whatever we can do to help you guys, let me know, please.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Darryl.
Take care. Have a great night, guys.
So we've got one last presentation for tonight. And for everyone that's into development, this is your guy. Ian MacLeod is joining us from One Properties, and they're working on the development that's going on at Queen and Parliament Street on the southeast corner. So Ian, I'll let you take it away.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. Good evening, everybody. And thank you very much, Aaron, for the invite. We're always really, really happy to get out in front of the community and talk about our proposals. It gives, although this format's not the same as sitting around a table, I'd like to make it as much as we can like sitting around a table. Feel free to jump in, fire your questions. I'll try to answer them, or leave it to the end. My name again is Ian MacLeod. I'm SVP of Development at One Properties. I'm responsible for this project and 3 other projects that we have in Toronto. Most notably, one of the other projects is at Queen and Sherbourne, and that is the project that's on the south side of Queen that runs from Ontario Street down to Richmond and almost all the way to Sherbourne, which was recently approved in principle for 1.5 million square feet, 3 buildings, a park, and of course, you know, a huge part of this neighborhood. And we also have a project at Church and Wellesley, which is at the northwest corner of that intersection, extremely important intersection in that community. We have a project in the Kingsway, which is is a challenging neighborhood to work in because there's such an established character and a strong feeling of wanting to protect the character of that neighborhood. Which brings me to Queen and Parliament. One property's view of Queen and Parliament is not dissimilar to the other projects. It is an incredibly important intersection, prominent, important in the sense that there's a mix of character areas, which I'll describe in a moment, and trying to respect what's there now, the character of Queen Street, the neighborhoods that surround it, and the impacts on the neighborhoods, impact on heritage, and being a part of the fabric and contributing to it going forward. These are all things that I want to try and address as I speak to you. I will call up my presentation, and I will say again, my colleague Michael Shavinsky is on as well. We'll take notes if you have questions. I'm a developer. I'm not an architect. I'm not a professional planner. Therefore, I can't answer everything. I'm good at trying to answer everything, but if I can't answer your questions, I'll definitely get answers from the pros. So if I may, now, can everybody see the Queen and Parliament presentation?
Yep, looks good.
You got it? Okay, good. Typically, we would have our architect participate or a planner, but I thought in this format that having the developer in front of you would be best. So Kurt Core, our architect, put this presentation together, but I'm going to speak to it. I think everybody knows the site very well. Southeast corner of Queen and Parliament. It is the vast majority of the entire block. So it includes everything on that block except for the Shell station at the south end. And I'll speak about Shell in a moment. Just an aerial shot to give a different perspective on it, with just really starting to give some context to the neighborhood, perhaps not the most comprehensive view of the neighborhood, but when we look to, for planning context, but also architectural expression and sort of inspiration, I suppose, for the project. We've just thrown up some imagery here, which you're all very familiar with. 339 Queen across the street, St. Paul's Basilica, which is a very important part of this community and something that we've tried to respect in the design. And then just some renderings and photographs of recently approved projects to give a sense of the emerging built form in this neighborhood, which tends to be not a pure tower form. It's more of these are tall buildings for the most part, but it's more of a built form that respects the neighborhood. So typically there's a base to the building, and then there's a tower element above. The towers in the King Parliament neighborhood, and I say King Parliament because of the planning references to King Parliament, the tower components tend to have a larger floor plate. In the distillery, we do see more of a traditional tall building form, but some of these other buildings show that taller, larger floor plate. On this, the intent is to just show some of the existing built form conditions, which are, there's a smattering of taller buildings, and then this emerging form, as I say, of some traditional tall buildings, and then the larger slab forms, which allows a developer in the community to avoid tall buildings, but it achieves the density targets that the province and the city have generally placed on the neighborhood. I'll step back for a moment. One Properties acquired this site in mid-2017. Shortly thereafter, in early 2018, we made our first submission for an official plan amendment and a rezoning. At that time, we had applied, and that's not reflected on the screen in front of you right now, but at that time, we had applied for a 29-story building that, while the height was the same, the GFA was about 20% greater than what we're applying for now. We've amended the application. I'll speak to that in a moment. Our original application had a public park, which sits at the southwest corner of Queen and Power. And largely the built form that we originally contemplated is reflected in the current application, except that we've done several moves to lighten up the application. So with that, what I'll do is I'll just speak. I'm not going to speak to the planning policy because I don't think we want to get dragged down into that too much. But generally speaking, the King Parliament plan puts this site into two policy areas. There's a Queen Street policy area, which is really the frontage along Queen, and is intended to reflect that heritage street front, three-story, very established built form, very pedestrian friendly. There's a tremendous amount of heritage assets and resources along Queen. And then the area about the 2/3 of the south site and south is in the, I think it's the Jarvis Parliament or regeneration area. And this is where density is intended to be put. The impacts are clearly off of Queen Street. The impacts are off of some of the neighborhoods, which are to the north. And that's both visual and shadow impacts. So this, Queen and Parliament sits at this interesting juncture in the neighborhood where there's a different, there's Corktown, there's the Moss Park elements, there's the gateway element to the Queen and Parliament intersection, sort of that prominence. So there's a number of things that we've tried to balance and consider as we've designed this site. I think the most important thing, or one of the most important things to talk about in what you see before you, which is our revised proposal, is that at the corner, we've enlarged the park from our original application such that our entire parkland requirement is satisfied on site. Most developments in the city, as you likely know, pay cash in lieu rather than dedicating park on site. Because the site is relatively large, the city had identified it as a priority to take the park rather than take the cash, to which we were happy to participate. This is a 500 square meter park that has been deliberately oriented to face onto St. Paul's Basilica and the bulk of that structure, the heritage structure here. And that was in consultation with the church. From our original, I'll speak to the base of the building. So from our original application, we reduced the base or the podium of the building from 6 stories down to 3. And that 3-story element really is, we try to reflect that through the vast majority of the site. But most importantly, along the Queen Street frontage, so that this element is a 3-story element that reflects the existing character of the neighborhood. We've also brought that 3-story element down Parliament. And again, that's down from the original 6 stories. The tower component, this 29-story element, has very intentionally been pushed down off of Queen into the middle of the block. And that is to pay respect to the fact that visually, the impact of a 29-story tower, while sometimes we look at these things from aerial perspectives or bird's eye perspectives, the intent here really is from a street level that what this really does is it puts people up into the building, into a portion of the site where there's just not the same impact. The idea is they come downstairs and then flow out into the street and then on to Queen Street to support the businesses and put people out, but as has been used in other parts of the city, you put those people in a tower sort of tucked away, I guess is the best way to put it. We have one driveway, and that driveway is off of power. So the entire project relies on this one entry point. That is a deliberate move to take off any driveways from Queen, which is really is a non-starter, but more importantly, to take it off of Parliament. We originally had a drive-through off of Parliament through onto power. So we've eliminated that entirely. That also takes all loading and delivery activities and puts it internally into the building, and it's hidden and can't be seen. The ground floor is made up of, most of it is made up of retail. And then the second floor is intended to be a grocer that, again, we wouldn't necessarily want to have a grocer on the ground floor, but what it does is it brings people into the project, brings them upstairs, and then draws people into all of the other businesses that are on the ground floor. There are, as you can see here, so there's the bulk of the mass is in the tower, but there are two real elements to create some stepping down and visual interest and terracing in the building. I don't think this is the ground floor. And again, here's the driveway off of Power Street with the internal delivery and loading. The park with retail that can face into that park and support that animation and activity on the park. We intend on doing smaller retail units. That's why we're showing these like ringing or around the perimeter of the building. And then as you can see in here, and we certainly don't want to talk about this, but this is really back of house and support for the functioning of the building. Again, tucked away from the street. The second floor intended to be a supermarket. And then we start to get into some of the residential units. There are 8 rental replacement units in this building, which are fully accommodated in the proposed new building. And just as a side comment, we often get asked this question, but one property is typically, or very typically, in the building, or the business rather, of building rental buildings. Our business model is to build rental. It's not to build condo. Often what happens in these projects is we don't declare whether it's going to be rental or condo until we break ground. But every intention is to build rental here. And there's actually growing support for new rental construction in the city of Toronto. As we go up the tower, this is where we get into more of the typical floor plates. We don't need to talk about this too much. I think it's notable to tell you that we are happy to honor the requirement to build 3-bedroom units, and we're proposing 10% 3-bedroom units in this project. Couple renderings, and I do hesitate. You know, these are renderings at the zoning level, so we haven't got to site plan. We haven't started talking about materials and the specific look of the building. We are always open to hearing the community's ideas on how to animate the ground floor, how to articulate the upper tower, and take that feedback to make sure that we're respecting, you know, the needs of the community and then how the community views this. So here you can see that 3-story element and how it relates to Queen Street. You can see the park and how this creates that space along Queen Street rather than looming over the street with a tall tower. These renderings sometimes, again, this is taken from an aerial or almost like a bird's eye view, and it doesn't give you that street sense and that street feel that I think is most important with these projects. It's the way we view them as pedestrians and people and citizens of the city. There's another shot. It's a slightly different impression of the architecture and the way the park is articulated. This park would be subject to community input on the design. As a developer, we're responsible for delivering the base of the park, and then we work with the community to deliver the design, which is not our design. We would assist in that, but ultimately the approval of that design is in the city's hands with the community's input. So I'm going to just take it off the share. Next steps, and just to let you know where we are. Our view, I'll be frank, I mean, our view on the height of the project in particular differed from the city's. As I say, we're at 29 stories. We felt it's appropriate for a site of this size. The floor space index is well within, actually below that of many of the other projects in the neighborhood. So we really feel that the impacts have been mitigated through this design, and because of the park and the driveway and the way we've respected Queen, we've achieved a lot of the goals of the city and hopefully the community on this. So notwithstanding that we have an LPAT appeal, we've been working towards starting a mediated process with the city. We're working with Shell Canada, who own the site to the south of us. They're a party to the appeal. And St. Paul's Basilica is a party to the hearing as well. But as we understand it, they're quite content with the design. They just want to be at the table in case any changes are made. So that formal mediation process hasn't been booked. Unfortunately, with scheduling things these days, it's a little bit difficult. But I would expect this fall that we'll be able to achieve that. The full hearing, which we'd like to avoid, but the full hearing is scheduled for January, January 25th. So I apologize if I buzzed through that very quickly. I'd be very, very happy to answer any questions or take any comments from the group.
Thanks, Ian. We actually have a number of questions in the chat. I've got one real quickly for you because a number of developers have talked about bringing a grocery store to Corktown. Can we get that in writing?
Can you get in writing that we will put in a grocery store? And I assume that's because you want one?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
It's been a point of a lot of community feedback that we've had over a number of years.
Okay, interesting. Well, I can tell you this. The second floor is designed, I think it's about 30,000 square feet of retail. We have every intent of filling that space, which is designed specifically for a grocer, with a national grocer. The way the world sometimes evolves, unfortunately, is that we have to adapt. As if our competitor across the street puts in a grocery store, then we have to go to our potential tenants and have that discussion with them. But I can certainly tell you that it's been designed for that. And I can tell you that we've had a strong interest from, there's one group in particular that wants to be here. I didn't mention the Ontario line. I did hear Adam talk about this, but that is a game changer for the neighborhood and for drawing a national grocer. If there is a station near here, at one time the planned track was actually to pass under the site. I think that's changed since, but just the same, there'd be high appeal for that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Well, I'm sure many folks here will be closely looking at that. So we have a number of questions. I'll just start from the top. And one of these is about the setback on Queen Street, so as not to hide the church tower view from downtown Toronto. What does that look like in the design?
So we didn't do any renderings, but the part of the intent of opening up the Queen Street frontage with that park was to create that visual, like that, the opening up to see the church from a larger area along Queen. And that was a very deliberate move that we were asked to consider. There's a vista or viewpoint that's protected by doing that. I can only really show that to you by through renderings, which I don't have. But that was a very important part of our discussions with the city.
Mm-hmm. We'd gladly make that available on our website whenever we can.
Okay. Yeah.
The second question I've got is the park at Queen and Power. Does that mean there's no Section 37 monies being paid to the city?
Two parts to that. The first part is no, that does not mean that there's no Section 37. Parkland is treated as something separate from Section 37. It is a requirement in every development in the city, whether it's done through cash in lieu or on-site dedication. Section 37 is it can contribute to parks. It can allow the developer to do upgrades or provide more than what's required. But Section 37 would almost certainly be part of any discussion, and that would be a discussion, of course, with the councillor about what's important to the community. The second part to that is the Planning Act is now changing, and the structure of how parkland, so Section 37 under the changes to the Planning Act has been eliminated. Now there's a community benefit calculation. So the municipality must come up with a list of requirements for the community and then go to the developers with more of a predictable community benefit payment. That legislation is evolving, but we've always said to the city that we'll give the park and then we'll have Section 37 discussions, whatever however the new legislation shakes out, basically.
Thank you for that answer. One of the other questions, you touched on this, but maybe you can expand on it a little bit, about the intention of who will be living in the residential building. Is it mixed social supportive housing, rental, condo purchase? You mentioned that there's going to be a rental component. Can you add a little more detail to that?
Yeah, okay, so rental replacement is only 8 units, but that is any tenants that are on site have the right to move back into the new development should they choose to at the rents that they're currently at. Sometimes rental replacement can be a significant portion of the development, but in our case, I mean, 8 units is not, is a relatively small component. But our intent is to do purpose-built rental so that it is rental in perpetuity. As a function of that, it does have it has a different character, I suppose, than a condominium that may be owned by a group of or a large number of investors. What purpose-built rental does in general is because it's institutional ownership with one group who has control over the entire building. Decisions can be made sort of, I think it's fair to say, with more of an eye to a long-term view for the building. Now, of course, we can't control the types of tenants, and we can't, only to a certain extent can we have, influence the type of people that are in the building just based on who can afford it. We have not spoken about an affordable component to this project. That would likely be part of Section 37 discussions. But, we view this as it's a high quality project. We have an institutional eye to these things where it's a long-term ownership. So ensuring that we have the type of tenancy that reflects that is very important. I hope that answers the question. I know, it's a question that we often get is, who's going to live in these buildings? And that's, it's largely market driven. But we do have a view that purpose-built rental provides there's a higher purpose really we're in the business to make money, but rental serves a higher purpose for the city. It's a city that desperately needs rental in my view.
Mm-hmm. Here's a quick, easy one. How many units are going to be in the building?
I've got that number. I apologize. I've got stats all over the place. Just under 500, so 486.
Thank you. A question about the shoppers. Do you know if it's when they're leaving, when they're vacating, and do you know if they're relocating nearby?
No, Shoppers has a lease that extends for several years. So, you know, we've had lots of discussions with Shoppers about possibly coming back into the project. We certainly would like to retain them one way or the other. But there's no plan on them being closed. Their lease allows them to stay for quite some time.
Mm-hmm. This is, you might not be able to answer this one broadly, but I think you could answer it as far as the construction hoarding and like building of the structure goes. There's a lot of boarded up storefronts on Queen Street. Could the boards be covered in artwork to improve the streetscape until the buildings are removed? What do you think? Yes,
we can. And we have done that, particularly at Church and Wellesley. If you happen to pass that site, you'll see that we have art installations in one of the buildings. They're displayed, you know, in a protected area. And then we've also done wall art, both in the laneway and then along some of the hoarding that we have there. We absolutely can do that. And I'm glad that was raised, because that, in the past, I've had programs where we had one as simple as the police approached us, said we had a blank wall, and asked if we could have a group of youth come out and, with somebody who could train them on site, put up graffiti art that worked out fantastic. So those kinds of things, whether it's that program or something else, we absolutely can do.
Excellent. Yeah, we've seen a lot of developers utilizing that type of program in local communities, especially around Regent Park, to great beautification of a construction site.
Right. I'm sorry, Aaron, we can do that now, just to be clear, and we can do that while it's under construction as well.
Yeah, I think that was probably the intent of the question.
Yes.
Let's see. This is about the rendering that you showed. I guess the question is, could you help with the perspective relative to the existing buildings? Does the park go on top of where the Shoppers is located?
Here, I'll call up the shared screen again. Just a moment. Okay, so if you can see that perspective, that rendering, the park, so Shoppers actually sits, this is where, I hope you can see my hand. That's the corner of Queen and Parliament, where the Shoppers sits now. So the street running along here, that's Power. St. Paul's is here. It's just not showing on here, but it is there. And so, no, the park actually sits at the other end of the block. Let me see if that might be a better perspective. So again, Shoppers sits right here.
And one of the other questions that was just after this one is about the actual park itself. I think you kind of touched on this, but that's just a kind of a placeholder rendering for now, right?
That's right. Now, we've gone through a few of these park processes where, again, our responsibility as the developer is to deliver this in base park, which just basically means we provide, in theory, we provide a sodded park. What happens in reality is we work with the community and the city park department to come up with a design that, again, as the developer, we don't have any control over. We assist in that process, and the final approval is with the city. So this is meant to be a placeholder. Often considerations are hard surfaces versus soft, child play facilities versus, passive parks. Those are all things that we'd be working with the community on as we move forward.
Great, thanks. The next question is, has there been any work or discussions with Great Gulf or the city about regards to traffic studies coming off of the Richmond Street off-ramp?
Off Richmond Street. So we haven't had direct contact with Great Gulf in that regard. In our transportation studies, we're obligated to, our engineers are obligated to consider all of the existing developments proposed, and in their case, it's going to be coming on stream. So I can't give you specific answers, unfortunately, but that has been incorporated into our transportation studies, which are still with the city. We've got some comments with them, but we will continue to have to work with them. One comment in that regard is a huge contributor to the parking to the traffic rather is the amount of parking that we have in our project. We envision this project as not having a lot of parking and not generating a lot of traffic. We believe, and I think the city would generally support, a low parking ratio in this because of the proximity of the streetcar, the Ontario line, and the ability to walk to the core. So I think, and I don't want to misquote, but our proposal for parking is probably in the neighborhood of, our ratio is probably 0.25, which is relatively low.
Thank you. Just to go back to the actual park itself, Cindy is asking, will the park be conveyed to the city?
Yes, it is something that we are obligated to convey to the city early on in the process. And again, we as a developer are responsible for delivering it in a certain condition, but title to the park is entirely with the city.
Okay. And how many bicycle spaces?
Yes. I think I said we have 486 units, residential units, but we've got, in terms of bike spaces, we've got over 500. I've got the precise number, but I know it's over 500. So we've got more than one per one, more than one bike space per unit.
Cool. That's great, especially with so many people joining the bike force this year.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Well, we've got one last question. I think it's a good one to end on. How soon do you think there will be shovels in the ground, both here and at Sherbourne and Queen?
So I'll talk about Queen and Parliament first. So regardless of how things go with the city, we will have our hearing in January, whether it's a settlement hearing or if it's a contested hearing. And then we need to go through the site plan process. On this application, I think it's possible that we would be submitting for site plan at or around the time of the hearing. That way we can hopefully deal with site plan and zoning issues at the same time. But the site plan process nevertheless can take up to a year, and then we've got to pull building permits. So all that being said, I'd be very happy if we were in the ground in 18 months, but that's an aggressive, optimistic developer view of things. So it's still some time away. Queen and Parliament, we have our zoning in principle approved by the LPAT and supported by the city. We're working through our site plan applications. Those could be submitted. We'd like to submit those second half of this year. So again, even similarly in that case, I suppose we would, I think the earliest we would be in the ground would be 12, 18 months, but that's an optimistic view.
And that's for Queen and Sherbourne? Or
that's Queen and Sherbourne, correct, yeah. And then there, at Queen and Sherbourne, there are 3 separate buildings that can be phased depending on, how things might evolve in the market.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us today, Ian. Certainly happy to pass on any of that further information on our website and social media.
Yeah.
And, yeah, thanks for taking the time today and to answer everyone's questions. And I think we're all excited to have that grocery store on the second floor.
Okay, duly noted. All right. Thanks very much, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for joining, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Okay, my pleasure. Take care.